There's an old joke about a Jewish man in Russia who falls into a lake. And he doesn't know how to swim, so frantically he's screaming, "Help, save me," as he's paddling and splashing about as much as he can, struggling to keep his head above the water. "Help," he yells, "help, save me." Even though there's lots of people around who can hear him and see him, no one stops to help him, even the group of soldiers that are standing there. So instead, he yells out, "Down with the Tsar!" And the soldiers grab him, take him out of the water, and bring him off to the prison. It's a very Jewish joke, right? How we respond to really tragic circumstances. There are a lot of ways as Jews we respond to tragedy. And one way is in moments of pain, moments of difficulty, we find a way to laugh. We find something, maybe it's out of defiance, maybe it's hope for the future. We find a way to laugh. There's another response sometimes in tragedy, and it's an old way, old and new. In the Talmud, there's a story where the rabbis reinterpret the words of Mi Chamocha, who is like you, Adonai, who is strong like you. See, who is so strong as you, God, who can hear the abuse and the blasphemy of the wicked and remain silent? Right? They rewrite the prayer, calling out God for standing by and allowing good things to happen to bad people, not stopping to help when good people are suffering. Similar to one of my favorite Jewish movies, I don't know if you're probably familiar with the film Defiance, about the brothers who led an armed resistance in Belarus. And in one of the scenes at a funeral, as they're burying two of their friends, they offer this prayer. "We have no more prayers, no more tears. We've run out of blood. Choose another people. We've paid for each of your commandments. We've covered every stone and every field with ashes. Sanctify another land. Choose another people. Teach them the deeds and the prophecies. Grant us but one more blessing. Take back the gift of our holiness." It's aptly named Defiance in the movie. It's not just the Nazis, but even God that they're angry at. But again, it's not new. That was the response of the rabbis in the Talmud 2,000 years ago, calling out God when they saw injustice, suffering that they didn't understand. It's the same prayer Tevye offers, right? "Please, God, we're the chosen people, choose someone else for once." So it's another Jewish response to tragedy. There's one more way we respond as Jews when tragedy strikes. And there's a midrash about when Moses broke the tablets, when he comes down from the mountain, right? Then he goes back up and he gets another set. And that set is put into the ark, and they're carried around with the Israelites wherever they go. But according to the midrash, it wasn't just the whole tablets, the ones that Moses got the second time that were placed into the ark, but it was the broken tablets too. As Jews, one of the ways we respond to tragedy is finding a way to carry it with us, to carry with us those broken pieces along with the wholeness. To find a way, even in times of sorrow, to see joy and goodness in the world. And even in those moments of joy and goodness, like at a wedding when we break the glass. Or there's a tradition when you get a house, you're supposed to leave a little corner of it, something unpainted, something unfinished, to remind us of the destruction of the temple. That even in occasions of celebration, even in our moments, our highlights, we remember the tragedies that as individuals and as a people we carry with us. And the question is, how do we find that balance? How do we live in the world carrying that kind of pain with us? A pain that this last year, since October 7th, has felt very real to a whole nother generation of Jews that I don't think ever really understood, academically maybe understood hatred, understood anti-Semitism, understood what it means to suffer, but didn't really understand it in any real way until we witnessed it firsthand. Pogroms taking place, blasted out on social media. Witnessed in our cities and in our streets celebration of those events. Witnessed politicians and friends turning on us. Jews all around the world. So how do we carry with us the pain, the anger, the brokenness, the loss? And also, how do we carry the wholeness of who we are as a people, of what it means to be Jewish, what it means to have a sacred tradition that's been passed down for over 2 millennia, a tradition that teaches values of what it means to be a light to the nations, guidance to the world. The answer goes back to those different responses. There are times we just have to find a reason to laugh, find a reason to celebrate, find a reason to have hope, even when it doesn't make sense. There's a story in the Talmud of 2 sages, or a group of sages who are walking on the road in the Roman Empire. And when they get to the near a city and it comes into sight, they can see it and they can hear it from far away because of just how big and great and grand this Roman city is. And the sages all start to cry, except for one of them, Rabbi Akiva. He starts to laugh. And the sages ask him, "Why are you laughing?" And he says, "Why are you crying?" He says, "Because these guys, these Romans, they bow to false gods, they burn incense to idols, they built their cities on the ashes of ours. And look how they're succeeding. Look how grand and great the city is. They're living in it with peace and security. That's why we're crying. Our temple was burnt and destroyed." And Rabbi Akiva says, that's the reason I'm laughing. If for people like this is their reward, imagine how much greater ours is going to be someday. It's an optimist. There's another such story of Rabbi Akiva, which is when they're walking in the ruins at the Temple Mount, right where the temple once stood. And they see a fox crawl out of the Holy of Holies, the most sacred place that only the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, could go, and just on Yom Kippur. So they start rending their garments, they start mourning. They start crying. And Rabbi Akiva then begins laughing. It says, "Why are you crying?" And they say, "Why are you laughing?" And he says, "I didn't think that the prophecies would be true. But there's a prophecy that one day foxes would walk in the temples. And now that I know that foxes do walk in the temples, I know that the prophecy that it'll be rebuilt someday is certainly going to happen." In that moment of brokenness, he was able to find a reason to be happy. He was able to hold on to a hope for a better future. And in doing so, he wasn't able to let his grief, a grief inflicted by someone else, define who he was, or come to define the tradition he stood for, Judaism, the traditions he would pass down. It's difficult to laugh in a situation like that. And yet, we have so many examples in our tradition. There are even some academics in Jewish studies that have written books on that. This is why there's so many Jewish comedians, and Jews tend to be so funny, is that we're coping with all of the pain, all of the suffering, all of the misery that we've had for generations. But how do we carry the broken and the whole? How do we live with both the pain of loss, and yet find ways to see the good in the world. This week, on Monday night and Tuesday, is Tisha B'Av. This day of mourning, which up until the Shoah collected every single tragedy was remembered on this day that was inflicted on our ancestors, on the Jewish people. From the destruction of the temples, expulsions, pogroms, Inquisition. There's a day of mourning. We read Kinot, we read these songs, these poems, remembering the pain faced by our ancestors, the tragedy, the suffering. 2,000 years of history are recorded in these Kinot. History of misery. It's a sad day, Tisha B'Av. The one that, personally, I'm a little sad, is less observed in the non-Orthodox world. There's one holiday I think we should all recognize. Tisha B'Av. Because it's what comes next. The rabbis in the Talmud are trying to figure out why the temple was destroyed. What meaning can they take out of this situation? And there's a whole discussion. One of them says the temple and Jerusalem were destroyed because the people desecrated Shabbat. Another says it was destroyed because the citizens of Jerusalem didn't say the Shema in the morning and in the evening. Another says it was destroyed because the school children were interrupted from Torah study and weren't given enough opportunity to do it. Another said it was destroyed because people didn't have shame before each other. And another that it was destroyed because it was small. Because the small and the great citizens were treated equally. There wasn't enough respect for the scholars. Another said it was destroyed because the people didn't rebuke one another when they saw wrongdoing. They just ignored it. They turned their heads. Another says it was destroyed because they disparaged the Torah scholars. And another said it was destroyed because there was no one there who was trustworthy. I'll admit some of the reasons the rabbis came up with might be a little self-serving. You have to respect Torah scholars more. But others found meaning in it. Whether it's the actual reason it was destroyed or not, they sought to find a way to transform that destruction into something good. To take those broken pieces and make it into something whole, something beautiful. That people need to stand up for each other. That the actions of our neighbor impact us. And when we see someone doing something wrong, we should talk to them. That honesty and integrity are important. That the next generation needs to be emphasized and provided for. They sought to find something from that tragedy that they could build, that they could make better. And that ultimately, I think, is the Jewish response to tragedy. How do we turn our pain into something good? How do we turn suffering into an opportunity to make a better impact in the world, to bring it a little bit closer to redemption? That's why I love Tisha B'Av. It's a day where we think about all of those moments throughout our history. And yet it's also a day that thinks about the future. How do we honor those sacrifices of those generations to make their visions come true, to bring the world a little bit closer to what they would have wanted? You may have read already, if you got the email or you got, during the Torah service or during the sermon already a little bit bored and amusing. I spoke this week about one of our members, Hayden Solomons. His memory be a blessing. Passed away a few years ago, and whose family built and dedicated this beautiful garden right outside, which is a beautiful day today. I encourage you to step outside and take a few moments and look at it today. Enjoy it. But more than just being this place that can be enjoyed for its beauty, the garden grows produce, vegetables that go to a local food bank. In 3 years, over 800 pounds of food have been created from it. It's incredible. Hayden's children, besides working with this garden, Max and Hallie also raised over $50,000 to get iPads so that people in the hospital back during COVID, when they couldn't visit and see their loved ones, could connect with them because they knew how hard it was for them when they couldn't go to the hospital to visit their father. They took that pain and they made it into something that made the world a better place. So the question is, if we approach Tisha B'Av, this holiday, this Memorial Day, as we think about our own moments of loss and the loved ones that we're missing, as we think about this almost year of pain and misery since the attacks on October 7th, how do we take that brokenness and carry it with us? Not in a way where we let it define us, where it makes us angry and bitter, it makes us removed from the world, it makes us as bad as our enemies, as those in each generation that sought to destroy us. How do we take that pain and instead turn it into something whole? How do we take loss and turn it into something that rebuilds? Ultimately, we need hope. We need hope that one day the world can be better. There's a story about Rabbi Hugo Grin, who was a child in Auschwitz. And on Hanukkah, after he made a makeshift menorah with his father, they used the little bit of margarine that they had to make the wick for the first night. And Hugo was angry. He protested to his father, "How could you use food which we need to sustain us, just to light a candle for this holiday?" He said his father spoke words that he never forgot. "My child, you can live 3 days without water, you can live 3 weeks without food, but you cannot live for 3 minutes without hope." We need hope. And if we can each have that hope, the hope that was in our Haftorah today, that even in moments of pain, the world someday can be a better place, can be redeemed. If we can have hope that even in our moments of loss and tragedy, when we feel like we'll never be able to smile again, that maybe someday we can. Maybe someday it'll get easier. If we can have that hope, we can start that journey of carrying the broken tablets with us, the broken pieces with us, along with something whole. We can transform it into a force for good. We can be a part of bringing about that better world. Shabbat Shalom.